Imagine a general who never lost a single battle. In over 100 fights. A warrior so feared by his enemies, they called him the Sword of Allah. His name? Khalid ibn Walid. From the deserts of Arabia to the gates of Damascus, his legend reshaped history. But who was this man, and how did he become one of the greatest military minds the world has ever known? If you love epic true stories of courage, strategy and faith, hit subscribe and tap the bell, because today, we're diving into the incredible life of Khalid ibn Walid. Khalid ibn Walid was born around 592 CE in the bustling, sun-scorched city of Mecca, nestled in the harsh yet spiritually charged landscape of the Arabian Peninsula. He hailed from the Banu Moqsam, one of the most influential and militarily powerful clans of the Quraysh tribe, the same tribe to which the Prophet Muhammad belonged. From his earliest years, Khalid was immersed in a world defined by tribal loyalty, desert survival, and the art of warfare. In pre-Islamic Arabia, known as the Jahiliyyah, or Age of Ignorance, honor, courage in battle, and poetic eloquence were the highest virtues. Young Khalid excelled in the first two. Trained in horsemanship, archery, and swordsmanship by seasoned warriors, he quickly earned a reputation for fearlessness and tactical intuition. His keen mind absorbed the nuances of desert navigation, supply logistics, and psychological warfare, skills that would later make him nearly invincible on the battlefield. Even as a youth, he stood out not just for his physical prowess, but for his ability to read the enemy, anticipate movements, and strike with precision. As he matured into adulthood, Khalid became a respected commander among the Quraysh, known for his charisma, strategic foresight, and unwavering loyalty to his tribe. When the message of Islam began to spread through Mecca in the early 7th century, it threatened the established social, economic, and religious order, particularly the lucrative pilgrimage trade centered around the Kaaba and its idols. The Quraysh saw Muhammad's monotheistic call as a direct challenge to their authority. Khalid, like many of his peers, initially opposed the new faith. He viewed it as a destabilizing force that could fracture tribal unity and undermine Meccan dominance. This opposition culminated in open warfare. At the pivotal Battle of Uhud in 625 CE, just outside Medina, Khalid played a decisive role. Commanding the elite cavalry of the Quraysh, he noticed a critical vulnerability in the Muslim ranks. A group of archers stationed on a hill had abandoned their post, lured by the prospect of collecting spoils from what they believed was a retreating enemy. Seizing the moment with lightning instinct, Khalid led a daring cavalry charge around the mountain flank, crashing into the exposed Muslim rear. The surprise attack turned the tide of battle, inflicting heavy losses on the Muslims and nearly killing the Prophet Muhammad himself. For the Quraysh, Khalid became a hero. For the early Muslim community, he was a formidable and dangerous adversary. Yet history is rarely static, and great souls often undergo profound transformations. In 629 CE, 6 years after Uhud and just months before the peaceful conquest of Mecca, Khalid ibn Walid made a decision that would alter the course of his life and the destiny of empires. He embraced Islam. The reasons for his conversion remain a subject of scholarly discussion, but many accounts suggest it was a combination of spiritual conviction, admiration for the Prophet's character, and recognition of Islam's unifying power in a fractured Arabia. Whatever his motives, his acceptance of Islam was met not with suspicion, but with open arms. The Prophet Muhammad, known for his magnanimity and strategic wisdom, understood the immense value of Khalid's military genius. Rather than harbor resentment for past battles, the Prophet welcomed him warmly, reportedly saying, "A sword among the swords of Allah." A phrase that would soon evolve into the legendary title Sayfullah, or the Sword of Allah. This was no mere honorific, it was a divine acknowledgement of Khalid's role as an instrument of protection and expansion for the nascent Muslim community. The Prophet immediately entrusted Khalid with sensitive and critical missions. One of his first assignments was to lead a small expedition to dismantle a center of idol worship in northern Arabia, symbolically severing ties with the old polytheistic order. Khalid carried out the task with efficiency and restraint, demonstrating that his conversion was not just political, but sincere. Over the next few years, he participated in key campaigns that solidified Muslim control over the Hijaz region. But his true test, and his greatest legacy, would come after the Prophet's death. In 632 CE, Muhammad passed away, leaving behind a fragile but unified community. Almost immediately, the Arabian Peninsula plunged into crisis. Dozens of tribes that had pledged allegiance to the Prophet now renounced their oaths, either out of opportunism, tribal pride, or allegiance to rival prophets who had emerged in the power vacuum. This wave of rebellion, known as the Ridda Wars, Wars of Apostasy, threatened to undo everything the Prophet had built. It was Caliph Abu Bakr, the Prophet's closest companion and first successor, who turned to Khalid ibn Walid in this hour of existential peril. Recognizing that conventional diplomacy would fail against armed rebellion, Abu Bakr appointed Khalid as the supreme commander of the Muslim armies. What followed was a breathtaking display of military brilliance. Over the course of just 1 year, Khalid led a whirlwind campaign across Arabia, defeating 11 major rebel groups in as many battles. He moved with astonishing speed, marching armies across deserts at night to avoid heat, using decoys to mislead enemies, and exploiting internal divisions among rebel tribes. At the Battle of Byzantine, he crushed the forces of Taleha, a self-proclaimed prophet, through a combination of feigned retreats and sudden cavalry charges. At Gamra, he outmaneuvered another rebel leader by splitting his forces and attacking from multiple directions simultaneously. His most dramatic victory came against the powerful Banu Hanifa tribe, led by the formidable warrior poetess Saja and later by Musaylima, another false prophet. At the Battle of Yamama, fought in a palm grove near modern-day Riyadh, Khalid faced an army nearly double his size. The battle was brutal, so fierce that over 1,000 Muslim soldiers, including many who had memorized the Quran, were martyred. Yet Khalid's relentless tactics, personal bravery, he reportedly had multiple swords break in his hands during the fight, and unshakable resolve led to total victory. By 633 CE, Arabia was once again united, not by tribal alliance, but under the banner of Islam. And at the heart of that reunification stood Khalid ibn Walid, no longer the enemy of the faith, but its most fearsome and faithful sword. With the Arabian Peninsula finally unified under the banner of Islam by 633 CE, one might have expected a period of consolidation and peace. But history had other plans. The newly forged Muslim state now stood at a crossroads, not just spiritually, but geopolitically. To the north and east loomed two ancient superpowers, the Byzantine, Eastern Roman Empire, heir to Rome's legacy and guardian of Christendom in the east, and the Sassanian Persian Empire, a Zoroastrian monarchy with a millennia-old tradition of imperial grandeur. Both had long regarded Arabia as a barren periphery, unworthy of serious attention. Yet both had also been severely weakened by decades of relentless warfare against each other, economic exhaustion, and internal instability. Sensing an opportunity, and guided by a vision of spreading justice and monotheism, Caliph Abu Bakr made a bold decision: the Muslim armies would march beyond Arabia. And once again, he turned to his most brilliant general, Khalid ibn Walid. Khalid's first theater of operations was the fertile plains of southern Iraq, then a province of the Sassanian Empire known as Asaristan. The region was home to Arab Christian and Zoroastrian tribes who had long served as buffer states for Persia. When these frontier tribes began raiding Muslim territory or refusing to submit to the new order in Medina, Abu Bakr dispatched Khalid with a modest force of around 10,000 men. What followed was not just a series of battles, it was a masterclass in mobile warfare. At the Battle of Chains, 633 CE, Khalid faced a larger Persian Arab coalition. Knowing his enemy relied on heavy infantry and rigid formations, he exploited the desert's openness. He used his elite cavalry to feign retreats, drawing the enemy into disarray, then encircled them with lightning speed. The name Chains came from a grim detail. Persian commanders had literally chained their frontline soldiers together to prevent retreat, a tactic that backfired catastrophically when the Muslim cavalry struck from the flanks, turning discipline into death traps. But Khalid's true genius lay not just in tactics, but in tempo. He understood that in desert warfare, speed was strategy. After Chains, he didn't pause to rest or garrison towns. Instead, he launched a relentless sequence of offensives, 4 major battles in just 2 months. At Saini, he defeated another Persian force by attacking at dawn, using the low sun to blind his enemies. At Walaja, he executed one of history's most audacious maneuvers. Anticipating the Persian plan to trap him between 2 armies, he secretly dug trenches and hid cavalry units in them. As the main Persian force advanced, his center feigned collapse, luring them into the kill zone, where his hidden reserves erupted from the earth like phantoms, surrounding and annihilating the enemy. Contemporary historians note that Persian commanders, accustomed to set-piece battles, were utterly unprepared for this fluid, deceptive style of war. Then came his most legendary feat, the Desert March to Syria. In late 633 CE, news reached Medina that Byzantine forces in southern Syria were massing for a major offensive. The Muslim garrisons there, led by commanders like Amr ibn al-As and Shurabil, were outnumbered and in danger of being crushed. Abu Bakr needed to reinforce them immediately. But the conventional route from Iraq to Syria, through the Euphrates and up through Mesopotamia, was long and easily monitored. Khalid proposed something unthinkable, a direct march across the Great Syrian Desert, a waterless expanse of 500 miles, over 800 kilometers, that even seasoned Bedouins avoided in summer. Most advisors called it suicide. Khalid, however, saw opportunity in impossibility. He selected 700 of his best cavalrymen, light, fast, and hardened by desert life. Each man carried minimal gear, extra water skins, and multiple camels for rotation. They traveled by night to avoid the scorching heat, navigated by stars, and followed ancient, nearly forgotten wells known only to nomadic guides. After 18 grueling days, they emerged like a sandstorm on the Byzantine rear near Suwa, in modern-day Jordan, completely unexpected. The Byzantines, confident in their control of the region, had left their southern flank virtually undefended. Panic spread through their ranks. Khalid wasted no time. He swiftly captured key towns, Firaz, Ain al-Tam, and Domat al-Jandal, cutting supply lines and isolating Byzantine garrisons. His arrival didn't just reinforce the Muslim armies, it shifted the entire strategic balance. By early 634 CE, Khalid had been given supreme command of all Muslim forces in Syria. His first major engagement against the Byzantines came at the Battle of Ajnadayn, near modern-day Beit Guvrin in Israel. Facing a Byzantine army estimated at 20,000 to 30,000, nearly double his own force, Khalid once again turned weakness into strength. He divided his army into small, mobile units that harassed the enemy for days, disrupting sleep and morale. Then, on the day of battle, he used his signature tactic, a feigned retreat by the center, drawing the overconfident Byzantines into a premature charge. As they surged forward, Khalid's hidden cavalry wings, positioned in nearby ravines, swept in from both flanks, encircling the enemy in a classic double envelopment. The Byzantine army collapsed. Thousands were killed, including their commander, Theodore, brother of Emperor Heraclius. The road to the great cities of Syria, Damascus, Emesa, and Jerusalem, now lay open. This string of victories wasn't just about conquest, it reflected a new kind of warfare, one that blended speed, intelligence, adaptability, and psychological dominance. Khalid never relied on brute force alone. He studied his enemies, exploited their assumptions, and moved faster than they could react. While Byzantine generals planned campaigns in months, Khalid operated in days. While Persian satraps sent slow-moving couriers, Khalid used desert scouts who could cover 100 miles in a single night. His campaigns redefined what was possible in 7th century warfare, and laid the foundation for one of the most astonishing military expansions in human history. The year was 635 CE. After a string of stunning victories across Syria, Khalid ibn Walid stood before the towering walls of Damascus, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world and a jewel of the Byzantine Empire. Unlike many conquerors of his era, or indeed of any era, Khalid did not immediately lay siege with fire and sword. Instead, he combined military pressure with diplomacy, demonstrating a strategic patience rarely seen in ancient warfare. For 30 days, his forces encircled the city, cutting off supply routes and launching probing attacks to test defenses. But he also opened channels of negotiation with the city's Christian inhabitants, many of whom were Monophysite Christians, a sect long persecuted by the Orthodox Byzantine authorities in Constantinople. To them, the Byzantines were not liberators but oppressors. The Muslims, surprisingly, offered something new, protection in exchange for a modest tax, jizya, and loyalty. When a section of the city's garrison finally opened the eastern gate, some accounts say at night, others through secret agreement, Khalid entered not as a destroyer, but as a guarantor of peace. He personally dictated the Treaty of Damascus, one of the earliest and most remarkable documents of its kind in military history. In it, he promised, "The people of Damascus shall have safety for their lives, property, churches, and crosses. Their city walls shall not be demolished, nor shall any soldier be billeted in their homes. They shall not be forced to change their religion." This wasn't empty rhetoric. Historical records, including Christian chronicles like that of John Bar Penkei, confirm that churches remained untouched, religious processions continued, and daily life resumed with minimal disruption. For a world accustomed to the brutal sack of cities, where rape, enslavement, and temple desecration were standard practice, Khalid's conduct was revolutionary. His conquest was not about annihilation, but about order, justice, and coexistence. Yet just months later, the full might of the Byzantine Empire would descend upon Syria in a final, desperate attempt to reclaim its lost provinces. Emperor Heraclius, aging and ill but still fiercely determined, assembled what chroniclers called the Army of the Last Hope. Drawing troops from Anatolia, Armenia, Egypt, and even Slavic auxiliaries, he amassed a force estimated between 80,000 and 150,000 soldiers, a colossal host by 7th century standards. Opposing them were roughly 30,000 to 40,000 Muslim fighters, many of them lightly armed Bedouins with little experience against imperial legions. The stage was set for the Battle of Yarmouk, 636 CE, fought along the Yarmouk River near the modern Jordan-Syria border, a clash that would decide the fate of the Middle East for centuries. For 6 days, the desert echoed with the thunder of cavalry, the cries of the wounded, and the clash of steel. The Byzantines, confident in their numbers and heavy armor, launched wave after wave of assaults. But Khalid, now serving under overall commander Abu Ubaidah, though widely recognized as the tactical mastermind, orchestrated a defense of astonishing discipline and flexibility. His greatest innovation? The creation of a mobile guard, a reserve cavalry unit of 8,000 elite horsemen that he kept hidden behind the lines, under his direct command. While the Muslim infantry held the center with grim resolve, absorbing Byzantine charges, Khalid waited. He studied the enemy's rhythm, their fatigue, their command signals. On the decisive 6th day, as the Byzantine forces committed their final reserves in a massive push, Khalid unleashed his mobile guard in a series of devastating flanking attacks. Like a scythe through wheat, his cavalry sliced through exhausted formations, cutting off retreat routes and sowing panic. The Byzantine army, once an unstoppable tide, disintegrated into chaos. Thousands drowned in the Yarmouk River trying to flee, others were cut down in the dust. It was one of the most decisive battles in human history, ending Byzantine rule in Syria after nearly 700 years and opening the Levant to Islamic civilization. Despite his unmatched battlefield prowess, Khalid remained strikingly humble. He wore simple clothes, ate plain food, and shared the hardships of his soldiers. When praised for his victories, he would often deflect credit. "Do not praise me. I am only a servant of God who fights with the sword he has given me." He once reportedly said, "I fight with my sword, not with my title," rejecting the glorification of his nickname, the Sword of Allah, as if it were his own achievement. This humility was not performative, it was rooted in a deep sense of divine accountability. In an age when generals crowned themselves kings, Khalid never sought political power. He accepted orders without complaint, even when they diminished his status. His loyalty was to the cause, not to personal ambition. Moreover, his conduct in war was governed by a strict ethical code that would not be formalized in international law for another 1,300 years. He forbade the killing of monks, women, children, and farmers. He prohibited the destruction of crops, orchards, or places of worship. When his soldiers once burned a village in retaliation, he reprimanded them harshly, "Do not become like those who came before you, destroying what they conquered." This restraint was not weakness, it was strategic wisdom. By protecting civilian life and infrastructure, he ensured swift surrenders, stable governance, and lasting loyalty. In a region fractured by centuries of imperial exploitation, Khalid's armies were seen not as invaders, but as liberators who brought security, fair taxation, and religious freedom. It is this paradox, a warrior of terrifying effectiveness who waged war with mercy, that makes Khalid ibn Walid not just a military legend, but a timeless example of how power, when tempered by principle, can reshape the world without destroying it. In one of the most striking moments of Khalid ibn Walid's life, not on a battlefield, but in the quiet corridors of leadership, came a decision that would define his character more than any victory ever could. In 638 CE, just 2 years after the monumental triumph at Yarmouk and at the height of his fame, Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second Caliph of Islam, made a bold and controversial move. He relieved Khalid of his supreme military command in Syria. To many, this seemed unthinkable. Khalid had never lost a battle. He had secured the Levant, crushed 2 empires' armies, and unified diverse Arab tribes under a single banner through sheer brilliance and charisma. Yet Umar's reasoning was not born of distrust, but of profound spiritual and political wisdom. He feared that the Muslim community was beginning to attribute their victories to Khalid's genius alone, not to divine will. "I did not appoint you for the sake of Khalid," Umar reportedly told the army, "but for the sake of Allah." He wanted to ensure that the nascent Islamic state remained a theocracy of principle, not a cult of personality. In an era when victorious generals routinely seized thrones, think Caesar, Alexander, or even later Islamic warlords, Umar's act was revolutionary, subordinating military glory to institutional integrity. What makes this moment truly extraordinary is Khalid's response. He did not protest. He did not conspire. He did not retreat in bitterness. Instead, he accepted the decision with quiet dignity, declaring, "O Commander of the Faithful, if you are removing me for the pleasure of Allah, then I am pleased." He voluntarily handed over the treasury funds under his control, submitted to an audit, a rare practice at the time, and stepped down without a word of complaint. From that point on, he served not as a generalissimo, but as a simple soldier in the ranks, fighting alongside others, taking orders from former subordinates, and never seeking to reclaim his former glory. This act of humility, in a world obsessed with power and legacy, reveals the depth of Khalid's faith and discipline. He understood that true greatness wasn't measured by titles or trophies, but by submission to a cause greater than oneself. In doing so, he set a precedent that would echo through Islamic governance. Military leaders serve the state, not the other way around. Even in retirement, Khalid remained a revered figure. Young warriors sought his counsel. Commanders consulted him before major battles. Though no longer in command, his strategic mind remained sharp, and his presence alone boosted morale. Yet he never used his influence to undermine Caliph Umar's authority. He lived modestly in Homs, Emesa, in modern-day Syria, a city he had helped liberate, raising his family and reflecting on a life of relentless action. Those who met him in his later years described a man of calm demeanor, deep piety, and surprising gentleness. The same hands that had wielded a sword in over 100 battles now turned the pages of scripture. The same voice that had roared commands across battlefields now spoke softly of justice, patience, and accountability before God. This duality, fearsome in war, serene in peace, is what makes Khalid not just a historical figure, but a human archetype, the warrior who masters violence so he can transcend it. Centuries later, Western historians and military scholars would rediscover Khalid's legacy and express astonishment at his achievements. Sir John Bagot Glubb, the British soldier and historian known as Glubb Pasha, who commanded the Arab Legion in Jordan, devoted an entire chapter to Khalid in his book The Great Arab Conquests. Glubb, himself a seasoned general, called Khalid one of the greatest military commanders in history, placing him alongside Napoleon, Hannibal, and Alexander the Great. Yet noting that Khalid achieved his victories with far fewer resources, over more varied terrain, and against more formidable empires. What impressed Glubb most was Khalid's operational tempo, his ability to move armies across deserts at speeds thought impossible, coordinate complex maneuvers without modern communication, and adapt tactics mid-battle with intuitive genius. Even B.H. Liddell Hart, the famed British military theorist who championed the indirect approach in warfare, would have found in Khalid a perfect historical exemplar. His campaigns at Walaja and Yarmouk are textbook cases of psychological deception, mobility, and decisive concentration of force. Yet despite these accolades, Khalid ibn Walid remains largely unknown in mainstream Western education. In American and European history curricula, the early Islamic conquests are often reduced to vague mentions of Arab expansion, or framed through a lens of religious conflict, with little attention to the individuals who shaped them. This oversight is not just a gap in knowledge. It's a missed opportunity to understand a pivotal moment in world history. Khalid's campaigns didn't just shift borders, they reshaped civilizations. Within a decade, a new cosmopolitan order emerged, from Spain to Central Asia, where Greek philosophy, Persian administration, and Arab innovation fused into a golden age of science, medicine, and art. And at the spearhead of that transformation stood a man who never sought empire for himself, only justice in the name of his faith. His story challenges simplistic narratives about Islam, warfare, and leadership. It reminds us that history is not driven solely by emperors and popes, but also by generals who know when to sheath their swords, and when to serve in silence. It is one of history's great ironies that a man who altered the map of the world, whose campaigns reshaped empires, redirected the flow of civilization, and laid the foundations for a new global order, remains largely absent from mainstream Western historical consciousness. In classrooms across North and South America, students learn of Caesar crossing the Rubicon, Napoleon at Waterloo, or Patton racing through Europe, but rarely, if ever, of Khalid ibn Walid crossing the Syrian desert with 700 horsemen or encircling Byzantine legions at Yarmouk. Why? Part of the answer lies in the legacy of Orientalism, a centuries-old tendency in Western scholarship to view Middle Eastern and Islamic history through a lens of exoticism, suspicion, or marginalization. For much of the modern era, the early Islamic conquests were portrayed not as complex historical phenomena driven by strategy, statecraft, and social transformation, but as sudden, irrational bursts of religious fanaticism. In such narratives, there was little room for a figure like Khalid, a brilliant tactician, a disciplined leader, and a man whose conduct in war often surpassed the ethical standards of his time, and even ours. But this omission is more than academic. It reflects a deeper cultural blind spot. Khalid's story challenges convenient binaries: East versus West, faith versus reason, conquest versus coexistence. He was a warrior who forbade the destruction of churches. A general who honored treaties more than emperors did. A man who once fought against the Prophet Muhammad, and later became his most trusted sword, not out of opportunism, but through a journey of sincere conviction. His life embodies the timeless human capacity for transformation. In an age where people are often defined by their worst moments, Khalid reminds us that redemption is possible, that enemies can become allies, that the fiercest opponent can become the most faithful protector. This is a message that resonates deeply in today's fractured world, whether in the corridors of diplomacy, the struggles for social justice, or the quiet battles within our own hearts. Moreover, Khalid's legacy is not confined to the past. The regions he helped unify, Syria, Iraq, Palestine, Jordan, remain at the center of global attention, often portrayed only through the lens of conflict. Yet beneath the headlines lies a shared heritage shaped in part by the principles Khalid upheld: protection of minorities, respect for local customs, and governance based on justice rather than domination. When he entered Damascus, he didn't impose Arabic or Islam by force. He guaranteed the safety of Christian clergy and allowed liturgical life to continue uninterrupted. Centuries before the Geneva Conventions, he practiced what we now call the laws of war. His campaigns were not about erasure, but integration, creating space for diverse communities to thrive under a new political order that valued stability over supremacy. In this light, remembering Khalid is not just an act of historical recovery. It is a corrective to distorted narratives that paint Islamic history as inherently violent or intolerant. Khalid's final years were marked by quiet humility. He died in 642 CE in Homs, Syria, not on a battlefield, but in peaceful retirement. True to his character, his last wishes were strikingly modest. He asked to be buried without a tombstone, fearing that people might venerate him. "I do not want anyone to bow at my grave," he reportedly said. "Worship belongs to God alone." Even in death, he rejected glorification. Today, a simple shrine in Homs is believed to mark his resting place, a site visited not with fanfare, but with reverence by those who remember his service. There are no grand statues, no national holidays in his name, no Hollywood epics. And perhaps that is as he would have wanted it. For Khalid never sought fame, he sought fulfillment of duty. His greatness lay not in monuments, but in the lives spared, the cities preserved, and the unity forged in a time of chaos. So when we speak of the sword of Allah, we are not invoking a myth of blind conquest, but honoring a paradox made flesh, a man whose sword brought peace, whose victories built bridges, and whose legacy endures not in stone, but in principle. In a world hungry for leaders who combine strength with mercy, strategy with ethics, and ambition with humility, Khalid ibn Walid offers a model that transcends time, religion, and geography. His story is not just Islamic history, it is human history, and it deserves to be known, studied, and reflected upon by all who believe that true power lies not in how many you defeat, but in how many you uplift. As the desert winds still whisper across the plains of Yarmouk and the alleys of old Damascus, they carry a quiet truth. The greatest warriors are not those who never lose a battle, but those who never lose their humanity.